Hi, guys. So, I come to you today to talk about a very interesting, very fascinating, often very overlooked piece of Monster High history. It's one that not even I think about very often, but it definitely just kind of lives somewhere in the back of my head, and every now and then I just go, oh, I remember that. That is, of course, the Monster High themed episode of Face Off. So, if you don't know what Face Off is, I can't really blame you. It's a show I actually used to watch pretty religiously, but I don't think it was ever extremely popular. But it was a competition reality show that ran on the Sci Fi Network. And the premise was that a group of prosthetic SFX makeup artists all competed in themed challenges to create looks akin to those you'd see in like science fiction, horror, fantasy movies, etc. So basically, it's like Project Runway, but for people who can tell you what the definition of a Jedi is. I don't know why I said that. I've never watched a Star Wars movie, but I loved this show. I just find special effects makeup and prosthetics so incredibly fascinating. And character design is also a big passion of mine, so I've always really loved the insight into people's creative processes, especially when they're put in the pressure of a competition. Face Off ran from 2011 to 2018, and the episode we're going to talk about happened in one of the later seasons, season 11 from 2017. So, season 11, episode 3, Monster High, which premiered February 7th, 2017. And if you're a big fan of Monster High, you already know why this time period is off to a bad start. And if you couldn't tell from the title of this episode, and also the title of this video that you clicked on, this is a Monster High themed episode. It was an official collaboration with Mattel, where the contestants had to create looks inspired by Monster High dolls. So before we get into talking about the actual episode, some things that I guess are important to point out if you're not a seasoned Face Off fan. Season 11 was an all-star season, so all the contestants are returning ones from previous seasons. Now, it has been years and years since I last watched this season, much less the seasons these guys were originally from, so I don't really have anything specific to say about them outside of this episode, I'm afraid. Also, they were forced to work in pairs this season too, rather than individually, which I remember not liking very much. I much preferred when they got to all create their own looks, but hey, I wasn't there. I wasn't running the show. So the episode starts by getting right into it. Immediately, everyone is at Mattel headquarters, and Mackenzie, who is the host and resident icon, says they're going to be doing a Monster High challenge. One of the contestants, Keelan, is obviously very excited. She says she's a huge Monster High fan. I believe her. I look at her and I immediately know she is of my people. I know we'd get along great, so we're off to a good start. The VP of Design at Mattel is there to talk a little about Monster High, and so since this episode is from 2017, was presumably filmed at some point in 2016, the Monster High in question is actually Generation 2, which is unfortunate, kind of. For the people in the cast who don't really know Monster High, this is their introduction to the brand. And we'll find out in a few minutes why this is also just kind of a strange framing. Mackenzie also says that the reason they're doing this challenge is because Mattel is toying with the idea of a live-action Monster High movie, and they want to see what their characters would look like in such a film. Well, Mackenzie, I'm from the future, and I can assure you they looked nothing like what went on in this episode, that I can promise you. So they go inside, and this is where they get to pick a doll and start on the design phase. And we go from a pretty good start to kind of a bizarre one, because they set out such a weird selection of dolls for this challenge. First off, there's a mix of G1 and G2 dolls. Second off, some characters are clearly already more advantageous than others. A character like Skeleta is going to be way more difficult to do prosthetics for than someone like Cleo, who is like literally just a human being in every way. And I think including characters like Cleo and Claudine who have human skin tones was also an incredibly weird and strange and bizarre thing to do, and I don't think I have to explain why. Also, where's Frankie? Like, Frankie is literally perfect material for this challenge, especially way more than Cleo, who is, again, just a human person that wears bandages. Natalie and Rebecca, designers for Monster High, they do actually show up and help give feedback on the initial designs, but they show up before anyone really has an idea of what they're doing, so they just kind of go from table to table and say, oh, Draculaura loves pink. Cleo wears bandages. Abby Abominable likes to snowboard. So I'm not really sure how much that helped everyone out. Now, Keelan and her team partner Melissa are actually the ones to get Cleo, though, and you can tell they're already struggling with how to translate her for the challenge. The ones that are really struggling right off the bat, though, are Adam and Logan, who got Abby Abominable, because they just feel very limited by the doll's design being too cute and too beautiful to lane into more monstery features. And that's actually kind of a recurring theme on Face Off. Male contestants, and again, I'm saying this as someone who is a fan of the show, have a tendency to be really restricted when it comes to beauty makeup. If they have to make something glamorous, feminine, quote unquote, beautiful, they start struggling hardcore, and they don't say it out loud, but you can kind of tell it's because they think certain makeup techniques are just kind of beneath them. It's kind of like when you watch cooking competition shows and male chefs tend to think pastry making is like this womanly, unnecessary thing to be trained in, even though there's always a dessert challenge like right around the corner. Maybe I watch too many reality competition shows. And I say this, but this is also interspersed with scenes of Sig and George with Laguna, who are kind of my MVPs for this episode, because they both admit to knowing nothing about Monster High at the very start, but very instantly they're like all in. And they do want to lane into a more creaturey kind of vibe, but find a way to keep the design very feminine and glamorous, which I'm all for, really. Then there's Emily and Tyler, who decide they don't want to do any facial prosthetics because they got Draculaura, and they don't think Draculaura needs any. They instead want to do a prosthetic for her collarbone to make it look like bat wings, which we'll see. On the other hand, Cleo's team are actually doing a full face prosthetic and also sculpting her bandages into prosthetics too, which is a very interesting way of going about it, but like, I genuinely cannot stress this enough. What on earth were they supposed to do? So day 2 rolls around. Abby's team decide to rework her face because they're really intent on giving her this monkey-like nose. The way Logan talks about it specifically is so... He talks like he knows the abominable snowman personally. He's so adamant that Yetis need to have simian features because that's just how they are. There's not a world where a Yeti wouldn't have a monkey nose, because all Yetis do. But they do decide to lighten the prosthetics on the face and focus on another central piece of the design, a handcrafted mammoth handbag. At first I was like, oh my god, did they make Abby turn Shiver into a purse? That's awful, but no, it's just a carrying case, which I actually think is a very cute detail. But also a lot of work for an accessory, which actually, now that I think about it, is very much in the Monster High spirit. Cut back to Sig and George with Laguna. They're living their best life. They're sculpting out fins for Laguna's arms and legs, and basically everything is going absolutely perfect for them. Draculaura's team is making a cute wig. Cleo's team is working on that facial prosthetic. Escalita and Venus's teams are... They're there. I'm sure they're working on stuff in the background, but this episode honestly just kind of ignores them, which is what they tend to do with looks that aren't either really incredible or just total disasters, reality show editing, So Sig and George, because everything in the world is going in their favor, they're ahead of schedule. So they do actually take the time to sit down and practice a beauty makeup look, and yes, I know, bare minimum, but after seeing so many men on this show who, didn't even want to attempt beauty makeup in their looks because they thought it was just so ridiculous such a thing would be even asked of them, I'm into it. I love it. I'm rooting for them. We do finally get a little segment with Venus's team, Gage and Rachel, and they're kind of doing the same thing Abby's team is. They're putting a lot of effort into this fully handcrafted pet Julian for the model to carry around. And Gage has this quote. He goes, "What would Freddy be without his glove? Or Jason without his machete? It's the same thing here." Is it? Is it the same thing? But he just says it so confidently, I have to give it to him, I guess. Day 3 of 3, the final day, application day. Venus's team actually gets some more screen time because their facial prosthetics came out looking really rough with a lot of tears, and now they have to devote some time to fixing them. Cleo's team starts applying their looks, and the bandages look great. Thumbs up. The face, unfortunately, looks awful. They're hoping it'll look more realistic once it's painted. Sig and George, you don't need me to tell you, everything is going wonderfully for them. Applicating, painting, it all looks perfect. Claudine's team, who I completely forgot was there for a while, I forgot there was even a team working on a Claudine character. Their facial prosthetic and painting seems to be going well. And I'll say I really like the structure they gave the prosthetic. It looks really cool, but again, I just question the necessity of including a character with a human skin tone. Cleo's team, right before it's time to head into judging, decide that their Cleo looks, and I quote, like an old, haggard drag queen. And I guess, they're not completely wrong. The facial prosthetic does look absolutely awful. And I know I could do no better, I would absolutely not do a better job, but as a viewer, it is my God-given right to judge people with talents I do not have. Anyways, they decide to completely remove the face and just do a last-minute beauty makeup on the model. And I can't help but feel bad for the team, because remember, they were huge fans of Monster High. They know the characters and the franchise, and I can't help but feel if they had literally any other character where there was more to work with, they might have done a way better job. So before judging, the contestants all have one last hour before going out on the main stage to finalize the looks. And this is when things always get intense. The music starts ramping up. This is where we're down to the wire. Everyone is painting like madmen. They're applying eyeshadow and glitter like their lives depend on it. Cleo's team is rushing to tear off her face and give her some makeup. Skeleta's team gets 2 seconds of screen time finally, and it looks like their look is coming along well, I think. Sig and George, frolicking, thriving, not a single issue going on in their lives. Venus's team actually finishes thinking that their look is one of the worst ones. And don't worry, we'll judge that for ourselves. Which, I don't think I mentioned this, but this isn't an elimination challenge. No one goes home this week. They just compete for immunity on the elimination challenge next week. So the contestants are brought out, and they're met with a little twist. The regular judges are actually not present today. Instead, there's a panel of what just looks like a bunch of random people, but are actually a group of Monster High superfans. Actual people from the Monster High community are going to serve as judges for this episode, which was just another layer of weirdness watching this back, because I was like, oh my god, some of these people were literally my mutuals on Tumblr, I knew them. Also, why wasn't I invited? Kidding. I would have been, I think 19 when this episode aired. I was not anybody noteworthy. Anyways, let's look at the finished makeup looks. First is Venus, and oh, okay, I see why they were not very confident in this look. Julian looks terrifying, which is probably what they were going for, so I guess that works. The teeth prosthetics. I don't know if they made them. I mean, I assume they did, but they really do kind of ruin everything because they pull attention away from everything else, which might actually be a good thing because the paint job on her face, oh, it's rough. Laguna Blue is next, and do you need me to tell you that she looks great? Is this the direction that I think Monster High would go with Laguna in a live-action movie? Absolutely not. I mean, we know this. We've seen Laguna in a live-action movie, but she just looks so cool. She's very monstrous, but she's also very beautiful. And for two guys who admit to being inexperienced in beauty makeup and wig styling, they gave it their all, went all in, and the work paid off. She looks incredible. Claudine Wolfe is next, and I think, the makeup, the styling looks good. They glued pieces of hair to her wrists, which looks really bad. Abby Abominable. Girl, oh, Abby. Shiver looks cute. They did a good job on Shiver, I guess. That's certainly Shiver. Absolutely. Skeleta looks cool, I think. We didn't get to see a lot of her creation process, or, basically any of it, but I imagine it was very difficult to create the illusion of a skeleton onto a person with, skin and muscles and all that stuff. But the work they did in the face and the little bone details in her arms and her legs, they're really hard to see, but they look really cool. I also have to say, I know the wigs aren't necessarily their fault. They styled them, but they were provided the wigs to work with, and Sci-Fi, could you not have shelled out a little more? The hair is just so incredibly crunchy. I see it in all the detail shots, just begging for death there in the background. You'll especially see what I mean when we get to Cleo. So for Cleo, I think they made the right call, completely removing that facial prosthetic. The final makeup look is not great, but they were obviously strapped for time, and it came out looking very okay. Recognizably Cleo, at least, and the bandage prosthetics do look genuinely very well done, even if they're kind of an impractical thing to do for a potential live-action movie. And finally, Jackie Laura, who I think also looks good. I do think the collarbone prosthetic was just a really weird decision, and I don't really know if I like it overall, but she looks fine. I also do wonder what the metric for choosing costumes for the looks was, because I don't think the contestants designed those necessarily. They never really talk about costuming or sewing or styling clothing pieces, but some of the outfits are one-to-one recreations of the dolls, and some are more conceptualized looks, so I don't know, I'm just curious. So after the runway, the panel gets a chance to evaluate the looks a little closer, to look at all the little details up close. Normally, when they do this on a regular episode, it would be so the judges can further inspect how well everything was applied, what has, maybe a visible seam or is kind of peeling off, where did they slack on the paint job. They'll take their little pointer pins and point at what you thought was just a mind-blowing prosthetic and go, I see a crack here, this is garbage, this is inexcusable, literally, how could you think to even bring this out on the main stage tonight? But obviously, since this is just a group of regular people, they're not going to be as in-depth or really as harsh necessarily. For Venus, they agree that the face paint is a little flat and not very well done, but they liked that she was instantly recognizable. I mean, of course she's recognizable, those fake teeth can be seen from space. They all love Laguna, of course. They like Claudine, too, but had some choice words about the fur they just glued onto her wrists. Choice of words being bad. There was one person that liked Abby. No one else was really very into her. One of them said that the execution was a little too Voldemort, which, I mean, yes. Yeah, now I can unsee that. They like Skeleta, but again, the show just kind of has her there for a second and then immediately moves on. poor Skeleta. They like Cleo too. They comment on how she's also really recognizable. But they had the most to say about Draculaura, I think. They all said she was super cute, and they were really excited to see those Batwing prosthetics up close. So after some deliberation, the super fans decide that Skeleta, Laguna, and Draculaura are the top 3 looks. Since there's no elimination, the rest of the teams are safe. But I do think we probably know who would have been in the bottom. I think we know. They do only go into further judging on the top 3 looks, so the critiques are predictably all pretty positive. For Draculaura, they think they captured her perfectly, but it's strange because they really only comment on the outfit and the hair. They don't really talk about the prosthetics or the makeup job, like, at all. It's just, oh, you really captured Draculaura's goth aesthetic. She's so bubblegum goth. She's so Victorian Gothic Lolita, which, I don't know, I think we're kind of just saying words right now. For Skeleta, I'm genuinely kind of surprised she was a top look on account of the combined 4 seconds of footage her and her team got in this episode, but I do really have to commend the work they did on her. But the panel of superfans were overall really impressed with how they managed to give the illusion of a skeleton character. And I am too. I think they did a really, really creative job with it. And for Laguna, everyone loves her. Obviously, they were really the only group to stray very far away from the character's appearance as a doll, which was a risk, obviously. But the fact that they were still committed to making her appear very fashionable and very glamorous, not necessarily in spite of having more monstrous features, but also finding a way to accentuate those features in a very beautiful way, like, it's just a very cool look overall, and they were stepping way outside of their comfort zone too, which is great. But after some more deliberation, to literally no one's surprise, Sig and George win the episode. They won a wonderful Monster High themed prize package, which I'm sure was so very exciting for 2 guys who seem to have never heard of Monster High before filming this episode, but I don't know. Sig and George seem genuinely like 2 really fun dudes. Maybe they came away from this as new Monster High fans. It's Sig and George's world, and I'm just living in it, I think. But yeah, that was the Face Off Monster High episode. I wanted to do a video over it because I feel like a lot of people don't even know it exists, but I think it's absolutely something that needs to be experienced, because 2016, 2017 was such a weird time for Monster High fans, and this did not help. This only made things so much weirder, but it's still such a really random, cool piece of Monster High history. So now it's your turn. Tell me if you've ever watched Face Off, if you watched this episode, what you thought of it. Tell me what your favorite look was. Who do you think deserved to win? Why do you think Frankie wasn't included as an option? Because seriously, why was she not? But that's all for now. Just be sure to like and subscribe for any future Fashion Doll content. Thank you.